Let's speak with Chris Morrison. Regularly helps us out on these kind of stories. Environment editor at the Daily Sceptic. Afternoon to you, Chris. Who'd have thought it that Ed Miliband has crunched the numbers and they might not be looking too favourable?
Yeah, well, you're referring obviously to this report that's come out, which I've tried to read in full. No, I was kind of on the programme. In fact, it's up behind a paywall, but there's enough evidence of what it is. It's really that the person who wrote it is suggesting that these bills are going to go up. Well, that is sort of, the bleeding blind and obvious. We know that. It's just how much they're going to go up. There was a number of energy chief executives who went to the House of Commons recently and said that even if the price of gas went to zero, energy bills would still go up in the next 5 years. Such is the horror show of net zero. And this report is very much on the line of we need renewables. And it's therefore, I think, as your previous guest I was listening to earlier in the programme, Pete Barnes, said that it's a rearranging the decks of the Titanic. It's not just that. The drunk is wandering around the deck trying to cheer everybody up by saying, I asked for ice, but this is ridiculous. Yes. And the band is warming up with Nearer My God to Thee. So it is the bleeding blind and obvious. The report suggests that it's really just a case of, yes, we know they're going to go up. It's fairly obvious from the figures. You only have to look at the figures, the £15 billion that are loaded onto electricity bills on consumers' bills every year. What they're used for. We know that domestic prices are fourth highest in the world. Industrial prices are the highest. So we know that these bills are going up. And the report suggests ways of trying to sort of fudge it to, if we take it off if we put it onto general taxation here and we do this. And he's very strong on batteries, which are one of the silliest ideas around the current battery provision. If we get a Dumpflau, which is the German word, as you know, for no frigging wind for a couple of weeks in the middle of winter, the batteries will last at the moment about an hour and a half.
All right, it's not really long enough, is it? I think
not really. No. But again, they're looking desperately for ways to suggest that net zero is still the future. That, as we know, many countries in the world have said no thanks. We've seen that; it just doesn't work.
Do you think? I mean, his overarching point on paper is really simple. Wind power, solar solar power, and nuclear power, which is getting a bit more of the headlines now, I've noticed, because perhaps they've realised the previous two are maybe a bit wobbly. But that seems to be, if you get all of that into place, then ultimately, maybe not by 2030, but ultimately things can only be cheaper.
Yeah, there's a problem with nuclear power. I'm not a great fan of nuclear power, but then, we've had conversations before. I don't see a problem with CO2, so I don't see a problem with using gas, but that's another discussion. But there's a problem with nuclear power. There at this moment, or there were, missiles flying over Chernobyl. Then you talk about national security, they'd be very easy to knock out if we were ever at war with anybody. And of course, the mess would be horrendous. They have these new modular units, which, even if they were subject to a terrorist attack, to be fair, wouldn't actually cause too much of a local problem. But nevertheless, it is nuclear power. The big problem with nuclear power is it's very, very expensive, much more expensive than gas, almost as expensive as wind if you take in all their subsidies. And it is only base load.
Yeah.
It will provide, as the French do, 40% of your base load. The load, in other words, that you will always use.
Of course.
But if England gets the World Cup final and at half-time everybody goes to make a cup of tea, the base load shoots up. It shoots up horrendously, and balancing the grid is a very, very difficult thing. It's becoming even more difficult when you bring in all of these different types of renewable power, but it becomes very difficult. And nuclear won't do that. It won't do that. It's expensive. It's potentially dangerous, although I agree that people say it's now safer than it was. And it's just not. It's another thing they put into the mix to say that we can go green. There are all these alternative ways of going green. The fact is that it's not just for energy, but for the whole of a modern industrial society. Hydrocarbons are absolutely vital. They're essential. Without it, we don't have the modern industrial society. And of course, we know from the Mad Miliband, we know that with his sort of neo-Marxist views of life, wanting to control everything, he's willing to impose that on us and to actually deindustrialize the country, to ruin the country. to make us energy insecure, to outsource all of our outsource all our energy, all of our production.
Well, to tell you what, the next few years aren't going to be dull, Chris, are they? And I know we're going to speak again many times on all of this, but thank you for shining some light on Dim Ed's idea to, well, stop the dimming, but probably not. He is Chris Morrison, Environment Editor at the Daily Sceptic. Thank you to him.